This is Dragon in a Pot, and I welcome you back to my channel. Today, we're going to be continuing our video series, World Building a la Mode. Today, we're going to be expanding our knowledge of the major players in your world. I find this incredibly useful when discussing figuring out who's going to be causing problems in your world, who's going to be giving you solutions, who's going to be giving you adventures. These are all things that give additional depth to your story. When discussing major players, I find it easiest to start at the beginning, covering who are the gods and demons in your world. Are they active players such as Hera and the Greek gods, where they were a relevant part of daily life? Were they like the Egyptian gods such as Horus, where they were present but aloof? They blessed the nobles and left the common man largely alone? Or are they the every peasant's god of Thor, Odin, and the Norse deities? These help give you a setting of how active are the deities in your world. Are they going to be popping up every 5 minutes, or are they simply going to be a name thrown around and referenced periodically? Then you also have the question of demons. Is it simply a rival deity, or a deity who has been outcast from the gods? A rival cousinry, maybe, such as would be the case with the Greeks. Are the giants and titans that the gods overthrew the demons of your world, or are you looking at the the Egyptian deities where they are akin but separate, where they are opposite sides of a spectrum, gods of order and chaos? Are you dealing with the Norse, where it is the gods are only distantly related to the giants that they fight, of elemental forces that are trying to break down and destroy the world that the gods have taken great care in cultivating? Or are you looking at more traditional Judeo-Christian demons that are seeking to overthrow the grand design for their own pleasure and benefit? These are things you can keep in mind as you're discussing who is going to be benefiting or hindering your players as they adventure from location to location. Are they going to see the beneficial hand of the gods creating opportunities for them to interact or gain prestige, prowess, perhaps treasure and glory? Or is the glory and seeking a righteous death through combat, is that the end treasure in mind by your deities? And perhaps your demons. Perhaps it's a simple rivalry of deities. You have two pantheons rivaling over a territory and rivaling over worshippers. Perhaps it is the deities of the goblinoids and orcs fighting against the gods of the elves and humans to give their believers a homeland. These are things you can keep in mind as you're discussing, and see if you can figure out how they interact with your players and how to watch out for them and how to include them in your grand plots. So one topic I find discussed earlier, the better off you are, is kingdoms and rulers. What type of governments are you going to be dealing with? Are you dealing with the single cohesive government of a large-scale empire where it's only the local adjustments to the general rules that you have to deal with and customs? Or are you dealing with something that is broader still, as would be the case with a galactic empire, where the laws in general are applied in broad stroke, but as you get to individual planets, the rules may differ greatly between two planets simply for sake of operational functionality. Or are you dealing with the small scale of maybe the Greco-Roman style of a senate and chancellors and the ruling governors of cities? Or are you dealing with maybe more Camelot or feudal Europe, where the local governor is law and his the might of his knights and military forces justify any laws he may decide to put in place, either in defense or in harassment of his people and neighbors. You also have the option of introducing various racial relations here, whether you're talking dwarves, humans, elves, halflings, gnomes, goblins, trolls. How do the different races interact? Are there going to be racial disagreements that cause maybe blood feuds that have gone on for centuries? Do you have elves that absolutely refuse to deal with the dwarves under any circumstances because they slighted my great 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 grandfather, and even though it was 8,000 years ago, we shall never forget? These are things that you can play into there as how do the kingdoms and rulers interact? How are the racial relations? Are there going to be circumstances where crossing territories may be a problem? And also, coins. Are different coins going to be valued differently between the different rulers, kingdoms, and state? The other factor to keep in mind is the local lord going to be issuing bounties, commissions, various things that the players can utilize to earn money or earn prestige or reward within the kingdom or kingdoms? And often important to a campaign is if you're on the good side of one kingdom or country or ruler, is that going to cause you advantage or difficulties when crossing a border? If you have, even if they're the same country, if you have a district ruler that is on bad standing or in disagreement with, or having a territorial dispute with another, if that is allowed in the region, is being on the good side of one ruler going to give you difficulties dealing with another? These are just a few things to keep in mind when dealing with kingdoms and the rulers of those kingdoms. The next question I find it helpful to ask is, what organizations do you want to have your players to have access to? Whether you're dealing with the secretive organizations of the Illuminati, where they're going up against or working for individuals seeking power, knowledge, wealth, or simply to function in gaining control without being noticed. These are things you can play around with. Or is it a purely selfless or selfish motive of an organization of an underground railroad of some kind, where you have individuals seeking to free slaves and break chains that are keeping individuals captive? This could be dependent on how your players are interacting. Are they keeping criminal slaves bound? Or are they seeking to aid in freeing thousands of unjustly captive slaves? So, depending on context, it can give you quite the interesting conundrum for your players. Or are you dealing with a group that is both hero and villain, dependent on which side of the conflict you're on, such as with the Knights Templar? This is a group that they were defending pilgrims as they went to the Holy Land, but dependent on which side of the conflict you were on, perhaps they're being viewed as thieves and robbers stealing treasures that have been held sacred by one group or another? Or are you dealing with a group that is dependent on context? Perhaps they are both good and evil in a different way. Maybe you have a group, an organization of a phoenix, that their goal is strictly to stay alive or seek immortality in some form. A goal that maybe they have righteous intentions for doing so, or perhaps they are strictly seeking to, maybe they are just seeking to avoid death at all cost. These are things that you can play around with, and depending on the temperament of your players, perhaps it'll give you opportunity to pull on a few heartstrings in unexpected ways. Next point of conversation would be your heroes and villains. These are individuals that, whether past, present, individuals that are either saving the day or causing mischief. Whether you're talking retired adventurers that have taken up owner of a inn and tavern or a shop of some kind, whether they are resting on their laurels in positions of authority, maybe they've earned a noble rank of some variety. These are individuals that your players can look back to in order to gain an idea of what will help them to accomplish their particular goals. Whether, again, simply gaining wealth to be able to retire and do what they will, or whether they seek power and authority. Maybe you have a player that wants to become king. Did the current king or have past kings earned the title? And how might they do the same? Or are you dealing with your existing players or other various bands of adventurers? Maybe there are rival adventurer guilds that are seeking to one up each other in getting bounties sooner and faster and more efficiently than their rivals. Or perhaps each adventuring guild has a claimed territory and maybe they simply look the other way, or when one group oversteps their bounds into another's territory, minor scuffles arise. Or is it simply first come, first serve? These are things that you can play off of and add a little bit of spice to your player's humdrum technique. Or perhaps the rival adventurers are the other side of the story, that once they find out are going to give them a moment of pause to rethink where they stand. Or perhaps you have your traditional tropes of a troll under the bridge that is harassing the local village and eating all of their sheep, goats, insert dietary sustenance here. Or perhaps it's a werewolf or werewolf den that has moved into the, or pack, there's the word I'm looking for. Werewolf pack that has settled into the area and is, again, murdering civilians, raiding herds, generally causing themselves to be a nuisance to the local peasantry. Or perhaps it is a Moriarty-style villain, or a vampire, whichever is more convenient to your liking. They are hiding in the open, a general known secret that they're not what they appear. Or perhaps you're trying to prove that they're not what they appear, and the locals are completely unaware of the danger that they are allowing into their own homes. Or perhaps it's simply an issue of perspective. Maybe the villains are completely alien to your way of thinking. Maybe they're simply trying to survive, and it's another territorial dispute, in their mind anyway. But in the process, they are devastating the existing populace in some way. These are things that you can keep in mind that allow quite a bit of flexibility in play. I thank you for joining me today on World Building a la Mode, Knowing the Major Players. If you've enjoyed today's video, I would hope that you would like and share it with your friends so that they may enjoy it as well. And if you're not already, I would encourage you to subscribe so that you'll receive notifications of when I post new videos. And until next time, this has been Dragonapot, signing off.